anyone who's watching this is an outlier also. These are all reality hackers. These are all people who are trying to hack reality to be exceptional in some way. So this is a toolkit. If you're the kind of person that believes in freedom of speech and the right to bear arms and figuring things out for yourself, and that you can learn anything, you can do anything, you can win at any game that you choose to play,
then this video is for you. Naval Ravikant will share 20 insights that every man should hear at least once in their life. I'm Jordan, made over $5 million, hired 50 people. Here is the first insight.
You know how much of a rule breaker I am and how antisocial I am. So I'm fully fine with my kids not having friends, not getting along, not being liked, not fitting in. I think that's a superpower.
The less you have the need to be social, have friends and get along, be liked, fit in, the less you have the need of that, the more mental clarity you have, which is the superpower he talks about.
I like being alone in cities. I actually live in cities. I like being around lots of people, just not having to socialize. I would say for our kids, socialization, I think kids are over-socialized these days. Our kids also socialize with video games. The best kinds of socialization are more natural forms of socialization when they're socializing across ages. There isn't this artificial segregation of third grade doesn't mingle with fourth grade, doesn't mingle with fifth grade. Our kids socialize with adults a lot, but I do think, for example, when they want to start dating, it's going to be a real issue. They're going to want access to the opposite sex. And for that, we're going to have drop-in classes and things of that nature. And, maybe they'll join like neighborhood activity groups that are, playing ball or playing games or, playing tennis or swimming or whatever.
So the mistake would be to assume that kids are not learning social skills because you are rarely seeing them with friends. To be even more precise, the mistake would be to believe that socialization is a good thing. It's not bad either. It's just that our thoughts are influenced most by those closest to our ears and eyes.
You're attracted to what you want to be. And as you immerse yourself in it, you have no choice but to become that over time. It's like in wealth creation. If you want to start a company, you go to Silicon Valley or you go to a pool of entrepreneurs and you spend enough time around them. You hang around the tech business long enough and you'll be in the tech business. You hang around a bunch of techies, you'll be talking tech all day. So we're naturally drawn to certain things. And if we can immerse ourselves in them, it creates inevitability to the future.
You are attracted to who you want to be and you have no choice but to become that over time as you immerse yourself into it. Of course, not talking about talent and injuries and so on. So I would be much more worried about one's YouTube app and which videos or podcasts. So personally, I would like to have seen the watch history or at least the YouTube feed of the person I'm dating at least once. I think it's an effective way to predict their future and then ask myself, is that a person that I would like to spend a significant part of my life with? I mean, very significant. Look at this graph. By the way, if you want to know more truths that I find in my own life, little experiments I run, well, I write about them in my weekly 2-minute email that you receive if you download this, a free Google Sheet with over 80 free tools that I use in my business, personal life. All free tools, no sponsors, no affiliate, just a good list of tools that I use myself and are free. Anyways, when it comes to your partner, it sounds Naval picked the right one.
We have a no control philosophy in the house with each other, my wife and I, and we've had that for a long time. She can't even schedule me. I can't schedule her. We don't commit each other. We don't, have big expectations. She can't make me go to like her parents' birthday. I can't like make her go to a business dinner. We're really non-controlling people to begin with of each other. So it's pretty easy to align on not controlling the kids. But that also means that if she wants to control the kids, she can. And if I want to control the kids, I can. I don't tell her don't control the kids, right? So we actually have very different styles. And it does cause a problem when like kid wants screen time. They'll go and negotiate with each party and whoever's more lenient will give them the screen time or the ice cream. So basically I get to be the good cop.
Okay, 2 truths here. Kids don't need their parents to agree on everything. They need to see adults managing disagreement well. And the less you control someone, the more pure the relationship becomes. Not that purity is good. In fact, most people don't want a pure relationship. They want a convenient relationship for the ego, which isn't bad. There's just truth and consequences. Listen closely to one of the consequences that I found very insightful.
There's a feeling that I sometimes get, which I don't know if the rest of you have this, but when you're around family sometimes, you feel a certain weight, like you can't be yourself, right? So there are times when like there's family around, you don't want them around because you feel a certain pressure. And it's just like if your friend was sitting there and doing the exact same thing, it wouldn't bother you. But because there's a family member sitting there and doing that thing, it bothers you. And it's like, why is that? This person's just sitting there reading the book. Why does it bother me that this person's sitting there reading the book? And it's because going back to the animal conditioning part, the one thing I did get conditioned on was over 10, 15, 20 years, having this person always telling me what to do, right? Saying, don't do this, do that. And it was always well-meaning and it was always with love, but they were always watching me.
I see. So for clarity, when you say family, you mean like your parents, not your kids.
Yeah, like my mom or even my brother, who I love to death, or my aunt, if they're sitting there, I'm just used to having gone through a combination of conflict and control and negotiation with them constantly, that I just feel like I'm being watched. And I think other people have this feeling too. And I don't want my kids to have that feeling. When I'm in the room with them, I don't want them to have the feeling that, oh, I might do something that he's not going to approve of. And so therefore, he will either say something or even just feel something disapproving. And therefore, I feel self-conscious, right? So I want to have as little of that feeling as possible in my life and my kids' lives.
Exactly.
Which is why I don't want to bust them. I don't want to be giving them rules. I don't want to be their enforcer. I don't want to be their warden. Being their enforcer and warden makes me worse off, makes them worse off, and it completely destroys their relationship.
So the less disapproving you are of someone, the more they can be themselves, which seems to be something innate in all of us, that we want being ourselves. And the weight you feel around family isn't their judgment today. It's the memory of being judged in the past.
I am now much more keenly aware of some things. It's like some things you learn about and then you become more keenly aware of things as a result. So I'm much more keenly aware how almost every conflict with a child is about a negotiation. They're negotiating for something because you have a rule. And then you're playing little king or dictator and arbitrarily renegotiating the rule on the fly. And then they go off and to the other parent and they try to renegotiate the rule if they don't like your result, or they try to figure out how to work around it. And when you start noticing that and you realize how much of your life is in negotiating rules and creating rules and routing around rules and how many interactions around that, you start developing a distaste for it, right? It's like if you didn't used to brush your teeth and floss like twice or 3 times a day, when you get used to that feeling of clean teeth, then you'll notice when there's a film on your teeth. Until you get to that point, you don't notice there's a film on your teeth, right? Or like if you're aware of your monkey mind, right? You meditate, then you start noticing like, oh, my thoughts are running away. But before you started meditating, you never noticed when your thoughts are running away. That's just normal. So now when you're aware of how much of this is about creating rules for them to follow, rules that, by the way, you would never inflict on anybody else, ever, out of love, out of hate, out of anything. And that's a good litmus test that Aaron lays out, which is like, if you wouldn't do it to your spouse, if you wouldn't speak that way to your spouse, don't speak that way to your child. So you become more aware. And as you become more aware, you will automatically make changes, is my point. Like you automatically say, you know what? I don't want to be negotiating a rule with you. Here's the thing. Here's the reason I'm telling you to do it. Take it or leave it, man. But here's the reason. Let's just make sure you understand my reasoning. And if you don't agree, fine, do what you want. But I do find there's certain contexts and ages that works better at.
All right, 2 truths here. Most conflicts with children are a negotiation of rules. So the more rules you have, the more conflict you will face. Big thing there to understand. And the more you expose someone to your way of finding the truth, the more their mind mimics it, especially if they like you. Because we don't just adopt ideas, we adopt from people we admire most.
The human mind does not just take explanations. If that were the case, then I could just sit on the other end of ChatGPT and get everything I needed and I'd be brilliant. No, we have to recreate in our minds. We have to fit it into our existing network of theories. We have to falsify it for ourselves. We have to test it. We have to see how it fits into our other theories and explanations and carry it with some degree of certainty or some tentative pseudo probability of whether it's true or not. And so it's this discovery scientific process all the time. So when my kids are unhappy, for example, I try to help them out, but I'm like, hey, why are you making yourself unhappy? It's like a hint, like maybe there's not anything in the environment that's making it happy. Maybe that's your reaction. Or if they ask me something, I'll be like, well, let's guess. Why do we think that might be the case? What's a guess? Oh, okay, well, why might that not be true? And a lot of times they deflect me because there's dad playing condescending scientist, which I know I shouldn't be, right? Like it's patronizing. I wouldn't talk to my spouse that way, so I'm already violating TCS. But, I'm trying to do this knowledge creation thing. And, it's actually really fun. So for a parent, one of the most gratifying things is when you get to connect with your child and discover something together. And my kids are already contradicting me. They'll say, well, you promised to do that yesterday and you didn't do it today, so you broke your promise, Dad. Right? Or they'll say, hey, you said this, but I think that's wrong. It's actually this. And that is very gratifying to a parent. Like from anybody else, your ego would actually get hurt if they said you're wrong. When your child says you're wrong and they're correct, your ego actually gets a boost. you feel better. That's the weird thing about having children. That's the genes in charge rather than the body. Feels great. So when this approach works, it is incredibly gratifying.
Knowledge and truth isn't delivered, it's discovered. And discovery is personal. But the great paradox here is the more you let them be wrong, the faster they learn what's right. So the question is more, what are the boundaries? Like Nassim Taleb once said, ruin is forever. So I would not let my children be wrong in crossing the street when the traffic lights are red. But then the question is, are there even boundaries you should set if it does not have an irreversible consequence, like dying?
Make sure that the kids have clear ownership. They're not forced to share things. Just like you don't force adults to like really share new things. You don't force the kids either. They can trade, they can negotiate, but they have clear ownership. And I actually just used this today. 2 items arrived at the house today. It was a set of Uno cards and a Pokemon box, and I gave one to each boy, and I assigned ownership, and I said, you can trade and you can negotiate, but there's clear ownership. Otherwise, if they're sharing, it's an infinite tug of war. When kids are fighting, they're really negotiating boundaries with each other. And you, as a parent, always show up late, and then you want to get involved in the middle of an adjudication. And a good rule of thumb is like, well, would you do that with 2 adults? If your brother and your sister were fighting, would you show up in the middle and start adjudicating? You know, no. If they started hitting each other, you'd probably stop them, right? So kind of the similar rules apply. You don't, if they're hitting each other, you get in the way and you're like, hey,
Right.
like, I don't feel good about this. But on the other hand, if they're having an argument, you let them have the argument.
You wouldn't assert yourself.
Yeah, if it's really loud and disruptive, you might say, hey, I'm in the house and you two are being very disruptive. I'm going to go elsewhere, you go elsewhere. But just keep it down. Settle your dispute, but keep it down. So I think the framework of trying to treat them like adults whenever possible, and just, it's better to think of them as adults who don't have the full range of knowledge.
Think of children as adults who don't yet have the full range of knowledge. I think that is a great perspective. Other truth here is the more you force something, the more you teach one to resent it. And the more you interfere, the more you train one to depend on your authority instead of their reasoning. But then what about giving your children life advice based on your experience?
Why not approach it with your kids the same way you approach it with your audience? Why not say, here's a set of techniques that seem to work. Here's what works for me. I'm trying this. Which one do you want to try?
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is the kids also have very different motivations. They're in discovery mode. They're in play mode. They're not in productivity mode. A lot of our routines that work well for us, that we have built for ourselves, they're not appropriate for the child because the child just wants completely different things. Most of the time, the child just wants to play and discover and live in the moment.
Yeah.
And in that sense, they're here to teach us as much or more than we are to teach
Sure.
them, right? If you spend your whole parenting time teaching your child, you missed it.
It's all about perspective. Switch your perspective and anyone, not just children, can show you truths that can change your life. So then what if children trying to show us a better way to live, but we keep interrupting? Well, I found the following clip very interesting because it shows the consequences of Naval as a parent who raises his children from the idea, the less rules, the better. Listen closely.
The beauty of this approach is that our current model puts a lot of pressure on the parents to control the kids, and the kids end up with very controlled lives. And I actually had my 8-year-old come to me the other day and he said, hey, Dad, I'm overscheduled. I'm really scheduled. He did it to me twice.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Right. And I sympathize with that because I'm famously unscheduled. So first he comes up to me and says, I'm really overscheduled. And my initial solution, this was a few months back, was I went to my wife and I said, he's overscheduled. Let's just cut all these classes and all this stuff, right? Just let him be free. He's almost hit puberty. By the time he hits puberty, I don't want him to resent us. I want him to have some agency and he can figure it out. So cuts the schedule. So now he came to me again a few days ago and he said, I'm overscheduled. So now channeling my inner Aaron, I just said, figure it out. You solve it. Right.
And what happened?
I don't know. Next level agency. Maybe he'll come to me now and he'll say, okay, I tried to solve it and this worked and this didn't. Do you have any ideas?
Dad, I rescheduled all my commitments in your calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the truth here with this parenting approach is that you make short-term sacrifices for long-term gain because you raise independent thinkers who later in life don't need your time or energy. Instead, you can tell them, like Naval did, figure it out yourself. But here's something even more fundamental that Naval found to be true.
But there's a couple of trend lines. As a parent, one of the things you realize is your ability to, even if you are fully into the rule system, your ability to enforce rules breaks down over time. It's just normal. The kids find gaps, they exploit the gaps, they get older, and our oldest is already hitting the age where I couldn't stop him if I wanted to. I hope he doesn't see this episode, by the way, because that's like instant jailbreak, right?
It's 2 hours in. I think he won't make it this far, is my guess.
Yeah, he's gone through a growth spurt. He's quite large now. He could probably overpower me shortly. So, we're already getting at the point where like, what rules am I exactly going to enforce and how on earth am I going to enforce these rules that you speak of? And then, the next one down just wants to copy him, and the next one down wants to copy that one. So there's a jailbreak already happening, a slow motion jailbreak. So I'd rather, kind of open the door and let them out and get some credit rather than, there was a revolt and they escaped and now they view me as that forever.
Your ability to enforce rules breaks down with time. So then what can you control? Well, listen closely to the following. I found it very, very accurate.
Judith Harris was this woman. She did like this famous meta study, maybe wrote a book on child raising. And what she basically concluded was it's mostly genetics, it's mostly nature, and then the remaining part that's nurture is from their peers. They're raised by their peers. And it's not really raised by their parents because they're trying to adapt to the world they're going to live in, not the world that you lived in. And so my conclusion from that was instead of trying to control your children, you can be one step removed and control their environment. And the way you do that is the most important decision parents make for their kids is where they live. What neighborhood are we living in? What friends are they around? What school are they going to? That's why parents are so obsessive about choosing the school, because you're outsourcing your child raising for half the time. This kid is going to be raised in the school by a collection of peers and possibly teachers out of your control. So you put a lot of effort into the school. So the same way, you curate their environment. Like, is the house look more like a library, or does it look more like a sports stadium? Is it messy? Is it clean? So you curate the environment, you curate the expectations, you curate the opportunities, you curate the peer set, you curate the location. And the nicer way to look at that is not curate by excluding, but opportunistic by including. You give them opportunities and new things to hook onto an obsession.
Two powerful truths here. Instead of controlling a child, control their environment, as they are mostly raised by their peers, and curate by inclusion, not exclusion. Like if you were to think back when you were a child and your father bought you a piano, violin, DJ set, Logic Pro for your MacBook, but also a soccer ball, basketball and boxing bag, then you would have likely picked that thing from moment to moment that you're naturally most interested in, right? So the more options you have, the more likely you will find something that you're both interested in and talented for. You can fulfill any desire as long as you have this one thing. What is the fastest path to become successful? Well, Naval answers that question with 8 genius insights in this video that honestly I think every man should at least hear at least once. See you there or not. Talk soon.